There's a specific kind of silence that happens right after someone realizes they've lost control of a conversation. I heard that silence on a Tuesday afternoon, and it taught me more about power than any book ever had. I was 31, working as an operations coordinator for a mid-sized logistics company outside Denver. Nothing glamorous. Spreadsheets, vendor calls, the occasional fire to put out. I'd always thought of myself as someone who avoided conflict. Not weak, exactly. Just accommodating. I said yes to extra tasks. I let people talk over me in meetings and told myself it wasn't worth the friction. I believed, somewhere deep down, that being liked and being respected were the same thing. That belief was about to get tested. Our department got a new regional director that spring, a man named Curtis. He had the kind of confidence that filled a room before he even opened his mouth. Within his first 2 weeks, I noticed something odd about how he operated. He never raised his voice. He never argued. And somehow, every single meeting ended with things going exactly his way. I remember thinking, how is he doing that? People far louder than him left those rooms with nothing. At first I assumed it was just his title. Authority does a lot of the talking for you. But then I started paying closer attention, and the pattern didn't fit that explanation. Curtis would ask a question, then just wait. He wouldn't fill the silence, even when it stretched uncomfortably long. Most of us rushed to soften a pause. He let it sit there until the other person cracked and revealed more than they meant to. There was something almost unsettling about how deliberate he seemed. Not manipulative in a cruel way. Just aware, in a way the rest of us weren't. The moment that really got under my skin happened during a budget review. One of the senior managers, a guy named Phil who'd been there 15 years, tried to push back on a proposal Curtis had made. Phil raised his voice slightly, listed off reasons, cited numbers. A totally reasonable case, honestly. And Curtis just nodded along, said, "That's a fair point," and then repeated Phil's own concern back to him, almost word for word, but reframed as a question. "So if I'm hearing you right, the worry is that we cut too fast and lose capacity we can't rebuild. Is that the real risk here?" Phil paused. "Yeah. Exactly. Then let's build in a review checkpoint at 90 days instead of waiting 6 months. That solves for that, right?" Phil agreed. The proposal moved forward almost unchanged. And somehow Phil left that meeting looking satisfied, like he'd won something. I sat there thinking, he didn't out-argue Phil. He didn't even really give anything up. He just made Phil feel heard, and that was enough to get exactly what he wanted. I started noticing it everywhere after that. It wasn't one trick. It was a whole quiet language I'd never learned to read. He asked more questions than he made statements. He'd let people finish their thought completely, even past the point where I wanted to jump in and interrupt. He rarely defended himself directly when criticized. Instead he'd say something like, "Tell me more about what's bothering you there," which somehow disarmed people faster than any counterargument could. He used names when he spoke to people, which I noticed made everyone sit up a little straighter, like they mattered more in the room than they had a second ago. And he never, ever explained himself more than once. If someone asked why a decision was made, he'd give a short, calm answer, and if they pushed again, he wouldn't repeat it with more urgency. He'd just say, "That's the reasoning," and let the silence do the rest. I noticed that repeating yourself, over-explaining, actually signals the opposite of confidence. It reads as begging for agreement. Curtis never begged for anything. I found this both admirable and, honestly, a little disturbing. It felt like watching someone play a game the rest of us didn't know we were in. The turning point for me came about 6 weeks in. I had a proposal of my own, something I'd been sitting on for months, a change to how we routed our regional shipments that I was fairly sure would save the company real money. But I'd never pitched it. Partly because I didn't think anyone would listen to someone at my level, and partly, if I'm honest, because I was scared of being dismissed in front of people. Curtis caught me in the hallway one afternoon and asked what was on my mind. Not in a performative way. He just asked, and then he waited. I remember thinking, this is the moment where I either say something real or I go back to being invisible. So I told him about the routing idea. My voice shook a little at first. And here's the strange part, instead of jumping in with feedback or questions right away, he just let me talk. He didn't nod along too eagerly or interrupt with his own opinions. He let me get all the way to the end, including the parts where I doubted myself out loud. When I finished, he didn't say, "Great idea," or "That won't work." He said, "Walk me through what happens if you're wrong." That question rearranged something in my head. Not because it was aggressive. Because it wasn't. It assumed I'd already thought it through, and it forced me to actually prove that I had, instead of just hoping he'd like me enough to say yes. I answered it. And in answering it, I realized I'd already solved most of the risks without even noticing. 2 weeks later, the proposal was approved. Curtis presented it to leadership with my name attached to it, not his. What stuck with me wasn't the win. It was the internal shift that came after it. I started noticing how much of my old behavior had been built around trying to be agreeable instead of being clear. I used to think confidence meant talking more, defending myself louder, filling every silence so nobody could question me. But watching Curtis, and then trying it myself, I realized real control usually looks like restraint. It looks like asking instead of insisting. Listening past the point of comfort. Letting your first answer be your only answer. Making people feel understood before you ever try to change their mind. None of it required being colder or more calculated in some manipulative sense. If anything, it required more attention to other people, not less. I had to actually listen to Phil's real fear instead of just waiting for my turn to speak. I had to sit with silence instead of rushing to rescue it. I had to trust that my one clear answer was enough, instead of needing someone's immediate approval to feel secure in it. A few months after that hallway conversation, I ended up in a meeting where a coworker challenged a decision I'd made, pretty pointedly, in front of the team. Old me would have either backed down instantly or gotten defensive and talked in circles trying to justify myself. Instead, I just asked her, "What's the outcome you're worried about?" And she told me. And once she told me, most of the tension in the room disappeared, because she wasn't actually fighting me. She was fighting a fear I hadn't bothered to ask about. I gave her one clear answer. I didn't repeat it 3 different ways to make her like it more. And she nodded, and the meeting moved on. It's strange how much of what we call charisma or authority is really just quiet discipline. Nobody in that office ever sat me down and taught me any of this directly. I learned it by watching someone who understood something the rest of us hadn't figured out yet, that most people give away their power by trying too hard to be understood, instead of trying to understand. I think about Curtis sometimes, not because he was some kind of genius, but because he made me realize how much of my old anxiety came from believing that control meant being loud, being first, being the one with all the answers. It never was. It was always about attention. About restraint. About trusting a single honest answer instead of chasing approval with a dozen nervous ones. I still catch myself slipping back into old habits sometimes, over-explaining, rushing to fill a silence that didn't need filling. But now I notice it happening. And noticing it, I've learned, is most of the work. I wonder how many people are sitting in meetings right now, in relationships right now, in ordinary conversations right now, quietly giving away their power without even realizing they're doing it, simply because no one ever showed them what stillness could do instead.